For my presentation, I chose to do it on the topic of nature versus nurture. So the question is, are certain psychological and behavioral traits a result of genetic influences or environmental influences? So for the nature side of this, that would be things like genes and hereditary factors, physical appearance, personality characteristics. And then for nurture, that's environmental variables, childhood experiences, the way that a person was raised, social relationships, and the surrounding culture. So right here is like a nice little scale of the different approaches to this nature versus nurture debate. On the left, we have the biological approach. This approach has a focus on genetic, hormonal, and neurochemical explanations of behavior. So biopsychologists, they will focus their studies on neurotransmitters and their influence on behavior, emphasizing the nature side of the debate. Then there's also psychoanalysis, innate drives of sex and aggression, nature, social upbringing during childhood, nurture, cognitive psychology, innate mental structures such as schemas, perception, and memory, and these are constantly changed by the environment. Humanism, Maslow, this is the guy who came up with the hierarchy of needs with the 5 different levels in it. He emphasized basic physical needs. Society influences a person's self-concept. And then on the right, we have behaviorism, which says that all behavior is learned from the environment through conditioning. And then for like social psychology, they will focus their studies on examining the influence of things such as peer pressure or social media on behaviors, emphasizing the nurture side. So an important term is nativism. This is the extreme nature position. Some philosophers such as Plato and Descartes suggested that certain traits are inborn. They occur naturally regardless of the environment. Nativists believe that, similar to eye color, hair type, or skin pigmentation, psychological characteristics are also a function of heritability. The assumption for nativism is that the characteristics of the human species as a whole are a product of evolution, and individual differences are due to each person's unique genetic code. Then there's empiricism, which is the exact opposite. This is the extreme nurture position. The famous philosopher John Locke, he was an empiricist, and what they believe is that psychological characteristics that emerge through infancy and childhood are the results of learning. The assumption for empiricism is basically tabula rasa, which means blank slate. What they believe is that at birth, the mind is a tabula rasa, that as life goes on, it gradually is filled by the experiences that occur. So the way that you're brought up or nurtured determines the psychological aspects of child development. An example of an empiricist theory is Bandura's social learning theory, which states that behavior is learned from the environment through the process of observational learning. So Bandura's experiment is a pretty famous one. It was conducted in 1961 at Stanford University, where Bandura was a professor. The subjects were preschoolers at Stanford's nursery school, and they were divided into 3 different groups. One group observed aggressive adult behavior models, the second group observed non-aggressive behavior models, and the third group was not exposed to any behavior models, so this was the control group. There were 3 stages to this experiment. Stage 1 was modeling. So there were 24 children in each of the 3 groups, and one child at a time, the researchers would take the kid into the experimental room and show him to a table at one corner of the room where they had some prints and pictures and stickers, just things, little things that they could play with, or I guess just observe really for 10 minutes while there was the adult model was in that same room but at the opposite corner, at their own table where they were playing with different toys. So for the aggressive group, the model played with this toy called a Bobo doll, which was like a 3 to 5 feet inflatable doll. So what they did is that they basically just like attacked the Bobo doll. They used a hammer sometimes, or they would throw the doll in the air, or they would just shout things at it. So there was like physical and verbal aggression shown towards the doll. For the non-aggressive group, the model would play quietly in a more subdued manner for 10 minutes. They kind of just ignored the Bobo doll and they played with the other toys that were there instead. And then for the third group, there was no model there, since this was just a control group. So the children, as they were playing at their table, they were also observing the model and what they were doing at the other table. Stage 2 was aggression arousal. So the way that the researchers did this, they subjected the kids to mild aggression arousal by telling them that they could no longer play with those toys. And then stage 3 was test for delayed imitation. So they told them basically that they couldn't play with those toys anymore, but they could take them to another room where they could play with other toys instead. So they took them to the next room, and this room contained some aggressive toys and some non-aggressive toys. The non-aggressive toys included things like a tea set, crayons, plastic, animals, and the aggressive toys included a mallet, a pegboard, dart guns, and the 3-foot Bobo doll. So the child was in the room for 20 minutes and their behavior was observed and rated through a one-way mirror. And then the results of this experiment were that children who observed the aggressive model before going into that second room made far more imitative aggressive responses than those who were in the non-aggressive or the control groups. So what this study showed is that the kids did learn from that behavior that they had seen prior, and they basically imitated it once they were in the room